Thank you, everybody, for joining us for our second session. As we already said, the second topic is democratization of public services as key to sustainable economy. It will be presented by Nikolina Rajkovic from the Institute of Political Ecology. So without too much introduction, I'll let Nikolina do her presentation, and the same thing will work like in the first presentation, where we will have first her input and then questions and answers and comments from the audience. Nikolina, welcome and go ahead.
Thank you. I would like first to thank to the organizers of the summer school for inviting me. And I would also say that I'm very happy to share the floor, even remotely, with Ece Temelkuran, who is example that sometimes, unfortunately, takes incredible courage to speak the truth, especially in increasingly authoritarian regimes such as Turkey. And I would like to thank her for that, and because it's a reminder for us that we should be grateful to live in countries that still provide us with a certain amount of freedom to express our political beliefs without a danger to end up in prison. So thanks, Ece, and thanks to all brave people and comrades in Turkey. With regards to public services, I thought that I should give first small and short introduction, although I know that you are very familiar with that because you work in public services. Basically, in the public services, is the late 1970s, a new public management model has been proposed as the best model to reform public service sector, with an argument that public services are oversized and over bureaucratized to some extent, and in some countries particularly corrupted, and thus failing to deliver efficient, more transparent and accountable service. So in the 1980s, the drivers of change, particularly financial market actors, pushed most Western countries, sorry, because my camera, pushed most Western countries towards a focus on making the public sector more competitive and public administrators more responsive to citizens by offering them value for money, transparency of business, and also a choice of service providers. So the biggest change was that, first of all, the state or the local and regional governments ceased to be the main regulator and provider of public services by opening the space for the private sector. And this was the beginning of the new paradigm in which public sector subcontracts or shares the responsibility with private sector in provision of public services, while private sector is very influential in development or becomes influential in development of regulation mechanisms and starts to monitor the performance. So the second biggest change was that the power in decision making started to become decentralized. In this new public management model, public servants became managers or share their management with new actors such as regulatory agencies, and they didn't rely anymore on rules and tasks, which we consider as inputs, but started to preoccupy itself with outputs, meaning taking care of what would be new indicators of performance, developing and supporting contracts that are enabling competitive environment, and starting to treating users as clients. So in this way, the new public management subordinated the public services to the market, and 40 years after, we are witnessing the detrimental consequences in quality and affordability of public services. Now, the most notorious examples, as we all know, is the privatization of British rail infrastructure. That is the company Network Rail, and that had incredible economic and social costs, resulted in many deaths of passengers as well. So this case shows that putting the railway network operator in private hands proves to be a very expensive mistake. It shows that reducing public spending by opting for privatization of services, whose essential aim should be to accommodate human needs may not only take lives but cost more. The failures of privatization usually lead to more public spending and costs because the state must guarantee the benefits for private investors who can't make profit. And we know that in public services, it's very hard the aim shouldn't be in making profits. There is one great study made by Transnational Institute from Amsterdam, which is a research and action-based think tank. And they published research study named The Future is Public in this year, and you can see it. It's available online. And they show that by the end of the 2019, there were 1,408 cases in the world of public services which considered both remunicipalization, meaning services returning back to public hands, or municipalization, meaning establishing new public services. And this is happening especially in the sector of energy and water. The most direct and most obvious impacts of public service remunicipalization are related to operating costs and infrastructure financing. And if the lessons haven't been learned after privatization of British rail infrastructure, we see today, now more than ever, that we need good and affordable public services. So I will talk about now a bit more about the lessons learned, or the hope for the lessons learned. So the first lesson that I believe should be learned from the global health crisis is that the present state of our public sector, actually its inadequacies are revealed today, and the health crisis pointed more clearly to the inequalities that we have already known they exist. So the reason why states across the Europe differently tackled the health crisis is precisely due to the tradition of weak or strong public services, and primarily health. As we know, the countries in Eastern Europe opted for extensive lockdown, meaning strong prevention, which was carried out through more or less authoritarian politics, in order to avoid additional pressure on the healthcare system. And such response also revealed the fact that political and state actors are aware that years and years of slow devastation of public healthcare in order to privatize it leaves the sector itself harmful and totally unprepared for responding to health crisis. And thus they need to prevent the spreading of virus by having as less patients in hospital as possible. That is the similar if we compare across Europe or the Europe nationwide approach to the USA based response. And we have also seen that these crises always call into the help the state and not the private actors, obviously knowing that the private sector is not a reliable actor in a proper response because it itself relies on the state regulatory mechanisms. And the states, as we can see today, obviously have the capacity, so the states are not weak, to efficiently respond to the crisis and to bring policies which aim to convert particular sectors from the logic of profit into accommodating basic human needs. And I will just name a few examples. I know that there are more of them. So that was the case with Spain, nationalizing all of their private healthcare sector and transforming it into hotels, or transforming the hotels into hospitals. Or the France, who actually used long-distance passenger trains as mobile hospitals, or the car producers who manufactured the medical equipment. And the most recent example is Lisbon, which understood that among the biggest pandemic priorities are housing needs. So it decided to provide workers in essential sectors, namely healthcare and transport and education, with secure housing by turning short-term residential houses, and namely Airbnb, into long-term homes. So these are also examples of articulated political will, which should stand in the forefront of our understanding of what is an essential nature of public services. By transforming only the housing policy, just to name some, we have a multiplying effect on society and social needs, meaning reducing gentrification or less tourists, or reducing the number of the tourists, means less pressure on public infrastructure, especially in the over-touristified countries. And that means also return of locals who can access public services more easily if they have security of their homes. And the second lessons that I hope we learned is that those who lost and risk their lives every day were the workers that were previously considered as parasites in public healthcare, in public transport, in education, in postal sector. So now these workers have become known as essential workers, with a clear difference that being essential now refers to accommodate the needs of society and not the needs of the employers. And when talking about what would be the democratization, what we mean by saying we should democratize public services, providing this short introduction about the new the models that were used to reform the public services, we can see by entering into the history of public services, especially the history of the 20th century, the different governmentalities, as Foucault would say, in a sense that the roles were perceived, the role of the public services were perceived differently throughout the history, and also their contribution to the society. And today, the public services such as healthcare, housing, water supply, electricity, and transport are key to environmental sustainability as well as the social inclusion of citizens. So democratizing them means acting to prevent privatization on the one hand, but also proactive behavior in the sense of improving the publicness if they are already in the public ownership. Because services are often provided with inefficient and corrupt public companies, as we all know in our regions, that is especially the case. And they are fully under control of political parties and mainly serve private interests rather than public one. So what we need today is a collective response in building strategies for decommodification of public services. We need our rights to extend to the point that we should have equal access to public services, and that is a political right that is not linked to being a member, that is linked to being a member of society rather than being citizens, because we know having the citizenship, because we know that migrants don't have political rights for the citizens, and they should be also incorporated in the idea of having the equal access. Apart from equal access, which I believe it should be the first imperative in the scope of democratization, we also need a high quality of public services, and this is what I meant by public services in public hands, which are often corporatized and serving the private interest rather than public, and they are also very corrupted. So in that sense, we need democratization in planning and managing the public services, meaning opening them not only to the workers and to the organized labor, but also to the users. One of the examples of democratization in the sense of management models would be having more workers and citizens in supervisory boards or bodies of public services. But also we need more workers self-managing or co-managing the public services. And in energy sectors, there are many of such examples, such as joint ownerships of the municipalities and citizen-led cooperatives. So there are clear evidence of the introduction or improvement of democratic mechanisms in the cases of reclaimed public services, so those who are being in the private hands and then reclaiming them back. And that is shown in the increased accountability, also in the transparency and sharing information. So obviously, I also think that we shouldn't have one-dimensional approach, meaning, okay, we will now deal only with one sector and trying to improve it and transform it. But we need to think inside and outside of sectoral policies, meaning that we should have multi-sectoral public policies, which will provide a proper answer in climate crisis and the forthcoming economic recession. We can't think about changing the tourism models, which rely on over-touristification, without thinking about social housing planning or thinking about how to transform the transport or transit sector. Yes, so the public and democratic planning of public sectors is essential in the forthcoming climate crisis, but also for that, in order to have that, we need a huge amount of public investment with a clear political imperatives and also democratically controlled sources of finance. As we know, sometimes even investment in renewables may also have a corruptive background. So I think that the state subsidies, we can't do much without the state. I will propose, and I'm a proponent of the state role. And I think that state subsidies and mass investment is essential in achieving post-carbon society or the just transition. Also, we have to think about widening up the social consensus and support for the post-carbon transition. As we know, the last year protests in France regarding the electricity bills obviously show that we need to have affordable services, first of all, and that the transition will not be easy, definitely. So we need to think about that as well. And I would also mention as a fourth point in this in the scope of democratization, I would also say that we need to rethink the scale. We are witnessing today very enthusiastic approach to municipalism or the local public services. But although they are welcomed and necessary, I think that they are not enough to reach decarbonization goals, which means that 80% of the EU electricity should be produced by renewables within the 30 years. But this requires systemic change, and I would say that I'm very skeptical about the fact that only municipal achievements can be beneficial in that sense. Although we have wonderful examples of towns producing their own energy from renewables. But the recent research actually shows that local energy is also dependent on state subsidies, and when it comes withdrawal of them, it endangers the production of renewables itself. So transformation at the municipal level can be a starting point, but not necessarily an end in itself. They are very useful in the context where the political opportunities for radical change are more open than the national level. But what we need more than ever now is simultaneously building capacities and experience, meaning wide and social movement, having both environmental activists, having organized labor there, having policymakers there, in building what we would consider as a transformation of the society. And I would conclude by saying that let's hope that the new star on the political sky in Croatia, the red-green coalition that won 7 parliamentary members, for the first time since the Croatian independence, will be a political actor pushing for that change, for democratic public services that will not allow only post-carbon, but also just transition, meaning leaving no man behind. And also in that sense, I would agree with Eja Kuran, who said a very simple but beautiful, sentence, that we are entering in the age of dignity. And it is very simple, but says a lot. And this is what's been shown by the teachers in last year, who actually struggled for dignified workplaces, dignified education. And I think that this is like, it should be our starting point in rethinking how to democratize and engage in democratization of public services. Thank you.
Nicolina, thank you very much. Lots of things were said. Of course, now we are opening the floor for your comments and questions. While we are waiting, maybe just a few comments from us. The fact that teachers are now seen as essential workers, and the fact that when you look at the protests that you mentioned of teachers, that they were fighting for their dignity, actually, a working place which allows for dignity, are maybe two key things for us. Of course, when we talk about privatization, in Croatia itself, the privatization of education did not happen, at least on this level of primary and secondary schools. There is only a few examples, but in some of our countries from the NEPS region, which covers quite a few of them, the privatization of education is doing exactly the same like it's doing in other public services. So I wonder, do you have an idea? I mean, maybe it's not really a question for you, but others can comment on that. What will stop privatization of education? This immense push in some of our countries where parents, so the citizens, are actually demanding it because the service they get is not good, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's well, as you said, with education, it won't happen on the primarily on the level of kindergartens or primary educations. But actually, we have experience of attempt to introduce to the wider scale of tuition fees in higher education in the universities. And I'm being a part of the. I started as the university activist, and I was participating in the occupation of the universities, also developing or trying to develop a narrative that, yes, we're actually, what we're doing, and this is not only the case with education as a public sector, but also in the healthcare, especially in transport, which I know a bit better because I'm working on railways. It's the same thing, basically, using the tactics and strategies to deteriorate the system in order to allow for the arguments to privatize it. Meaning, okay, we have corrupted management, we have we have schools that have or kindergartens that have so many kids. We don't have an infrastructure supporting that. We need private investment to bring that infrastructure. We need a service that will be more quality. What we're forgetting all the time is that nobody, for instance, asks those who have the most knowledge about how to run the system, how to manage the sector. And these are the workers who are working there for years and years. And usually we need the projects, political projects, that would involve these people and also users to decide about how to manage and how to run public services, how to allow them to develop mechanisms, inner mechanisms of decision making in order to improve the service itself. I mean, it's very, how to say, what is the problem in general with the movement around the public sector that is very anti-privatized. It is the common the denominator is agenda on anti-privatization. It should be also proactive agenda, meaning that okay, we need to act in the early stages to improve the state of the public services in order for them not to come into private hands. I hope that this crisis will show that, you know, there have been huge mistakes with taking some of the vital industries such as Pliva and you know, industry that was developing medicines, putting them in private hands. You know, if we're expecting the cure for pandemics, we will probably expect it, and we should develop research and you know, develop research and also empowering people in public sector, because it will probably come from the private, from the public universities or public institutions.
Okay, we have a question and a comment from Sanya here. So teachers in Croatia are public workers. I would say that in almost all countries of our region they are. I hope one day they will have some kind of professional body that will guard standards, so that it's not only about let's say unionization, but also about the professional standards of the profession. Private schools are not such a big problem as the fact that teachers do not have a voice. What do you think about that, and how do we give them a voice? Who should give them the voice?
Who should give the teachers the voice?
Yes. I mean, we hear that all the time, that people don't have a voice. In this case, now we're talking about teachers, so.
Okay, I mean, of course, there is a voice, but it's being silenced, and that's the problem. You know, there is always. I don't really believe in like giving the voice. I mean, like voicing out the voices that are already being present in the public services. I'd say that, okay, I can give one example in the what could be possible approach to bringing workers in the public services alongside with the, let's say, labor activists or unions and also policymakers, are projects that allow for a wider social interaction and developing policies. So there are possibilities, although not a lot of them, from the EU founding to enter the, you know, the funding and to seek the models that would improve the states of let's say, if we talk about kindergartens, then definitely if you want to develop any kind of model, especially because as I know, I think that in Zagreb, definitely there is a question of not having of lack of the kindergartens, and also that workers there are overburdened because they have too many kids and they cannot simply, the system cannot handle that. So we have, I as also a member of another organization that deals more with labor organizing, can say that we entered in a project that are working very closely with the kindergarten teachers and working with them, taking into account their voice, and also a lot of them actually started to become started organizing in the grassroots movement, such as local politics, which is also important. As I said, you know, I think that we should be able to go out of our workplaces and try to engage in the grassroots politics or support it in somehow. So I think that the politics and workplaces are, you know, organizing is essential in that sense.
Okay, we have a question that kind of comes close to what you're talking about now. Are the state public services and the local political focus versus the central hub compatible?
Sorry, I didn't hear. Are
the state public services, so public services run by state, and the local political focus, so if we focus on local politics versus the central politics, are they compatible?
Hmm.
Do you think basically the public service from the local, or let's say grassroots or local community level?
I don't know what would be examples in that. Maybe communal services would be example in that sense, the way waste management or water supply or something like that. So definitely, if I understood correctly, I'm not sure if I understood it. Improving local communal services definitely needs a political force. So, and I think that we are on our way to enter this severe political struggle, because I definitely believe that, and this was I can also say from my experience that unfortunately only networking or working together, working on projects won't change much, or will change it, but it's not a significant change. That's why I say that I think that our real arena of struggle is the state or the city. I mean, for me, that's the very same, but it's the same. I'm talking about the same struggle, quality, that should be the same struggle. But of course, approaches can be different, and we have to take into account the context, the different regional context. We have to be aware of that. I hope that Zagreb will have. Sorry, I'm not centered on Zagreb, but obviously. Obviously, the Zagreb, I believe the Zagreb, especially after now this detrimental, horrible politics regarding the earthquake renovation of the city, that will be definitely a pushing factor for different local politics. And I also hope, but this will be definitely very hard to achieve, transformation of the communal services, as we know how they function, is very clientelistic key, but there are also workers involved there. We have to take into account their position also, and possibility, not to deal with a lot of layoffs, because the people were just there because they're definitely, I don't know, pro local government or something like that.
Okay, we have another question. Thank you for your presentation, from Sandra. Could you bring a specific example of one of the best cases of democratization of public services in your opinion? She's suggesting something from the Nordic countries, where the role of public sphere is big in many public services, i.e. many public services are decommodified. And also the citizens are active in the process of making public services. E.g. the Swedes are actively exercising school choice, for example. What would be your example of the best democratization of public services?
There are a lot of examples, as I say. I mean, that in almost every country, especially if we talk about developed countries in Europe, have their own examples of how to democratize public services. And it is especially, more or less, it is always the result of a long struggle, environmental struggle, in the sense of municipal models of energy production, let's say. Or I don't know, labor struggles or struggles of activists for water supply that was privatized in Berlin, and also in many of the towns in France as well. But I say that I was pretty much impressed by the fact how the communal services function in Zurich. And I was there for a study visit twice last year. And I mean, It's very different to compare our situation to the country that was actually, we know, didn't have much of the, let's say, class, labor, or ethnic, or whatever kind of conflict, and definitely had good economic, historically good economic foundation for the communal services that are functioning very good. I mean, they're especially if we talk about supervisory boards. I mean, they also have corruption, but they don't call it that way. And but they are very sensitive towards it. And if somebody's talking about the corruption, they will immediately change the director of the communal service or whatever. But the point is that the citizens are having instruments which are political, like referendums or citizen initiatives, where they can complain or try to improve the service in the city. So this is constant, I would say, a constant political activity going on there. They're very, very politicized. They're very, very engaged in a decision making of the town, and they have their say. Also, the citizens and the workers have their say in the way how to manage the communal services. And I'd say, well, in the sense of water supply and also waste management, they are performing very well. So I don't know if there are many things in English, but German speakers or German-speaking people could, you know, I believe that it could be beneficial for them to, if they want to read about. I definitely say that Zurich would be my, you know, favorite.
Your first favorite.
Yeah,
okay.
but I'm not sure, you know, if we cannot just easily copy paste the models.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have other comments? Would somebody like to speak maybe, or ask another question? For some reason, I think that we find this topic, although it's very much about public services and education as the main public service, how to connect it to what we do. And I'm not sure why that is, but okay. Yeah, doesn't seem that there is more comments or questions for you at this time, Nikolina. So I would then like to say thank you very much for participating and for giving us your views. And we continue the summer school tomorrow at the same time, 11 o'clock. Tomorrow we are then going more into education and what happened during lockdown. We will hear from parents and teachers about how they perceived it and what they've learned from this situation. Nikolina, thank you very much again. Everybody, thank you for participating. And some of you we see tomorrow, and those who we don't, goodbye and thank you. Thank you so much.
Good luck with the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.